to figure out how technology can be leveraged to make adult learning easier, but also how to integrate digital literacy into that use of technology so that when adults go out into the world, they have some awareness, some confidence, some skills that they can leverage to accomplish all those digital tasks that pop up when you least expect them. And that my background is actually my PhD were in my dissertation research was actually with second language education and with a focus on digital literacies to support adult refugee English learners. So very comfortable working within this literacy world with you all. So let me just give you a little bit of an overview of what I want to accomplish today. So I just want to set the stage, why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. Then I'm going to share some strategies that teachers can use to plan instruction that leads to what we're starting to think about as digital resilience. That's the skills, awareness, expertise, confidence to leverage digital literacies out in the big wide world, and understanding that when teachers are working with learners in the classroom, we're talking about diverse groups of learners. So there's not one size fits all approach to any of this. And so then, and that means knowing your learners, what digital skills instruction is necessary, how are we going to do it in a way that's meaningful, relevant, not
You
a
gotta slide
complete
them.
not a
Make
complete
sure
distraction from
monitor
content
privacy.
instruction. I'll just wait for you to mute them. Cool. Um, and then I'm going to be sharing resources along the way. So when I talk about the work that I do, so I was a classroom teacher for about 15 years, and so I cannot help but talk about anything without it being in the context of resources that I hope teachers can use. So every single observation I make is going to come along with some sort of strategy or resource that I think is useful. And so that you all don't have to be madly clicking on links or zapping QR codes, I put everything in this handy wakelet. So this is the one QR code you should zap, or I can chat the slide. Actually, you'll have access to the slides. So if you just want to pick up the link later, you can. But you rest assured you will have an easy one-stop shop for all of these resources that I'm going to be talking about. And incidentally, teachers, if you haven't used Wakelet in your instruction, it's a really easy tool and a really great way to share a lot of digital resources with your learners. All right, so this talk, sorry, I'm just going to get to the next slide. Okay, so in this talk, I'm going to focus how digital literacy, technology integration, language instruction, um, learner agency and self-efficacy all connect to support an equitable approach or an equity lens, I guess, in adult education classrooms today. I want to focus on what it means when you're planning instruction. You want to integrate technology, you need to support digital literacy, but you're aware that the learner sitting in front of you might have limited prior or interrupted education, limited prior access to technologies, and then also possibly know your learners may be reading and writing for the first time ever and in a new language and asked to use digital technologies as they're doing so. So, supporting these learners means paying attention to their skills, their needs, and the barriers they're facing now in the classroom and beyond the classroom, and attending to this understanding that there have been barriers all along the way. So you kind of need to hold all of this. So what I'm sharing here is like an antidote to that shiny new tool approach and that great excitement that a lot of technology oriented teachers might feel when they hear about a new technology tool and they're like, yeah, I'm going to try that in my classroom tomorrow. This is like, whoa, hold on. There's a little bit of thinking that has to happen before that kind of tech integration happens. So what I hope my talk does today is kind of give you some of those, develop that understanding and give you some strategies to help you get there. So just in case people didn't know, this is great data from Pew. They have these internet fact sheets, a broadband fact sheet, mobile learning fact sheet, and it's really awesome data. It's updated really regularly, and it gives you interesting information on who's connected to the internet, who's using the internet, for what purposes, and it breaks things down by many different demographic categories. This is a shot from the website of who uses the internet by education levels. And you can see over here that although all areas are making progress, learners who have less than a high school graduation, secondary education, secondary credential, are the ones who have the least use of the internet. The other thing that's interesting to note about these learners is that, let me get to the next, that a lot of these learners tend to be smartphone dependent even when they do use the internet. So that means the only device that they can use to get online is their phone. And so you see up here, although this is improving, it's going in the right direction. Students who have less than a high school degree are those who are most likely to be dependent on their smartphones for access to the internet. So why does this matter? Um, any ideas for why this matters? If you, as I'm talking, if people want to throw stuff in the chat, feel free, and we can, or ask questions, and we can come back and revisit some of these comments and questions. So I'll just share a little bit about why I think this matters. We encounter technologies daily and in multiple forms, digital technologies. Digital technologies now shape the context for literacy engagement in the world for everyone. And learners can't avoid encountering this stuff at work. So what you see are some screenshots from workplace, from, just like accessing things on your phone, needing to, this is the standard, like this is not what digital access means anymore. It's all of this other stuff too. So this is kind of an opportunity and a challenge simultaneously. We need to make sure that we're preparing our learners for this, but it also provides a unique opportunity for us to understand the context in which learners are going to be using technologies and bring that context back into the classroom so that we can support them while they're with us and prepare them for success outside. And a lot of this has to do with considering literacy as a socially situated process. And so this is like a little timeout, a little theory time out here. Um, I just want to acknowledge that language is a key component in digital literacy because of the technologies that are circulating and how often we encounter them and how they often require interpretation of text through solving tasks that involve digital technologies. So we need to be making sure that when we're teaching learners literacy, basic reading skills, numeracy, whatever it is, that we're giving them an opportunity to exercise, that to flex those skills, to understand how that the language, that literacy is represented within these technologies. It's, I mean, it's digital technologies, digital communities, digital environments are without a doubt new places for making meaning in the world. So we're looking at basic. So reading is looking at these basic decoding skills, and also I would argue basic computer skills. But then also understanding that literacy is not just one thing. It's kind of all digital literacies now, and digital literacy encompasses everything that you see here on this slide. So it's an opportunity, right? We have a new context. We have a highly relevant context, potentially highly motivating context to support literacy instruction and English language learning instruction in classrooms. But I just want to acknowledge that it is often very problematic. Like there are benefits and there are challenges to this situation. And I want to just show you a few. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, yeah, I've encountered lots of challenges. There are problems when we introduce digital technologies in the classrooms, and also in what we understand our learners to be doing in the real world. For example, with generative AI, we know that chatbots have these hallucinations, but they can also be easily manipulated. This is a really recent article actually associated with the Technology and Social Values Lab at Princeton. so your backyard, showing how chatbots are providing information about the November election. So super important to understand that we need to be critical users of technology. We can't just say, yes, embrace it all. Learners need it. Yeah, we know that, but we also need to do it really critically. Another example of this is Padlet. Padlet is a really wonderful tool that you can use to support collaboration in classrooms. Um, there is a new Gen AI feature in Padlet called I Can't Draw, and it pulls images from the web that correspond to the text that you type in describing what you want to do. And it's important to recognize that these Gen AI technologies actually amplify the stereotypes that are embedded in the data that they draw on in the large language models. So, for example, this is a teacher doing late night lesson planning. We see one guy here, that's good, but the rest are like white ladies, which is something that happens in the US in term with instruction. But this is going to amplify bias that we find online. Another example, a doctor talking with a patient. Thank goodness there's like one woman, but these people are all white and well, or possibly all white. And again, amplifying bias that we might find online. A nurse checking a patient's blood pressure. Yeah, amplifying AI is going to amplify bias. So don't be thoughtful about the way you bring technologies into your classroom, but it is essential to bring technologies into your classroom. One more sort of cautionary tale. We talked about how a lot of learners are limited to using the internet by accessing it on their smartphone. PDFs can be problematic. So if you're working on digital text and you know students or you're assigning readings and their PDFs, you know your students have to read them on their phone. You just need to you need to pay attention to the devices that learners have and how they can access the content. Obviously, this is hard to read. Okay, so I just did like the devil's advocate thing because I know people have a lot of concerns about technology integration. But the big message is there's a balancing act. And if we're going to integrate technology equitably, you've got to attend to all these other considerations. So let's now get into some strategies that I'd like to talk to you about. So how do we plan instruction? This is the goal, planning instruction that leads to digital resilience for diverse learners. So helps them to feel comfortable and understand how these digital tools are relevant in the classroom and prepare people to encounter similar technologies in the real world. Again, this is just a reminder about the Wakelet. If anybody didn't get a chance to shoot that code before, this is your second chance. Okay, so again, we're thinking about using technology to meet two goals. Generally, this is the way I like to think about it. We want to focus on using technology to enrich instruction. It's a great way to create opportunities to increase opportunities as learners to extend learning, to personalize learning, to offer opportunities for collaboration as students are learning. But then it's also important as we're doing so that we need to be supporting the new digital literacy skills that are going to help them use these technologies in the classroom. So there are a number of things that make it possible to do these two things simultaneously. The first is that you need to know your learners. Eric was an advisor on this project. So Eric says, Eric says yes too. I was co-PI on a project led by Dr. Kathy Harris at Portland State University called the 21st Century Learning Ecosystems Opportunity. Our goal was to explore basically we started off thinking we were going to be exploring the use of digital technologies for frontline workers in employer supported education programs, and essentially it got much broader because we were able to see how like diverse the learning opportunities these learning experiences or events learners were exposed to. And really early on, it became important for us to recognize that the programs that were succeeding were the ones that really stopped and understood who their learners were right from the very beginning. So we were able to create a framework here that represented some of the characteristics of the learners that the employers or the HR program officers or teachers were doing to know who their learners were, and what was important to support engagement and learning. So this is an example of one framework you could use to understand your learners, like what are their goals, short and long term? What kind of prior education did they have? Are they working now? What's their current position? How what do they need to be supported in their learning? Like, do they need childcare? Do they need access to a laptop at home? What are some barriers to learning? Are they caregivers to like how many people? Do they not have a car? And then what any other factors that might come up? Like, do they have a super supportive employer, or is there like a relative or somebody like a child that's helping them with their learning goals? So some really important questions to ask, and a way to understand your learners so you know what you're getting, what they might need as you're moving forward with them. Another strategy that I think is important is to definitely consider shaping your digital content, if you're using digital content, to be mobile friendly. We know that so many learners rely on their phones to access to like even work on like a proprietary online curriculum or access reading materials. So if you're going to make stuff or you're going to look for stuff, try to align with some really important characteristics. So if you're making slides, like you're using Google Slides to support instruction, limit the number of points on on your screen. Plan your layout, remembering that people might be using touch screens. And so you could use navigational cues like hyperlinks within the touch screens. Make sure that you're using a big enough font size, layout, and colors, and design that is going to be most readable for learners on a phone. A really great example of this work. Oh, sorry, there's more. Um, and make sure you're using a file type that increases flexibility. So if you know that none of your learners have access to PowerPoint, maybe or Microsoft products, maybe don't share PowerPoints like in an email. Um, there are some really good examples of this. And this is linked in the Wakelet. This is Nan Friedland. She is an educator in Connecticut, and she was one of the very first teachers I was able to connect with during the pandemic, who had successfully migrated her low level ESL class completely onto remote instruction in the early days of the pandemic. And she did it by creating very short videos that she embedded into Google Slides and distributed through WhatsApp. Um, if in the Wakelet, you can link to this blog post that talks about some of the things that she did to make that happen. And you can also see a little video of her talking about the work that she did. But you see, some of the layout of the slide corresponds with some of the recommendations. It's got very clear instructions. There's just like one main idea on this slide. So it's just a great example. Both this slide is as a good visual example, but then also Nan's work in general. So I encourage you to check out the blog post.
Jen, can I say something really quick
Yeah,
about WhatsApp?
yeah,
So another feature of WhatsApp that's really nice is that you can record audio files on it. So
yep,
I have my students have like sent me WhatsApp saying like, teacher, how do you pronounce this word? Right? They've got a word that say, how do you pronounce that word? And literally on my phone, I can record it in WhatsApp and then send it to them. Right. And
yeah,
so you don't have to go through 3 or 4 steps. You literally can give them a pronunciation guide like on WhatsApp itself. It's really
yeah.
a nice feature.
Yeah, and this is going to tap into a strategy that I'll mention in a bit, but learners are using WhatsApp probably already, and so it's a they're it they they're it's easier for them to make use of it in instruction. So the next strategy I want to talk about is instructional routines. There is a breadth of research on instructional routines and how they can support learning. As part of working on the Digital Resilience for the American Workforce Project, which it has been supported by Octay and the U.S. Department of Ed, um, we created a suite of learning resources to help teachers understand how to integrate digital literacy instruction into their content instruction. And one of my favorite part of this project was actually working with Kathy Harris and many SMEs to write this playbook, which has descriptions of technology integration to support digital literacy and content learning within financial literacy, health literacy, workforce education, and civic education. And a really important aspect of the lesson descriptions in here is this idea of a routine, an ed tech routine. So essentially what an ed tech routine does is it's routine use or regular use, repeated use of one technology tool. Um, so that learners can gain confidence with it, and so that when they go into the big bad world, they if they encounter it, they can more easily engage. So examples might be, let's say you have you do exit tickets at the end of your class. So for a while, a teacher might choose to do exit tickets on Google Forms so that learners get used to using Google Forms. And then maybe in a little while, like after a few months or a few weeks or whatever, after they're comfortable with Google Forms as an exit ticket, you could then integrate Google Forms into another type of instructional activity in the classroom. So you could alter the routine. The routine has now become the technology, Google Form, and it can be used, across purposes for instructional purposes. Um, Another thing that you could do, so the students are used to the routine of doing exit tickets, you could just bring in a different technology to do that. Like you could use a quizzing software like Menti or something. But the idea is repeated use, so they're building the confidence, the skills, and the awareness. Another way you can so you can find a bunch of routines. I encourage you to go to the Draw site. You can read about the use of the routines embedded in one of these lessons, and then you can also get access to the routines themselves and a routine template, so you could actually create your own routines. Another place to find routines is in our EdTech Integration Strategy Toolkit. This is a really great free app. I think it has about 1,000 resources in it, many routines. You can search this app according to the digital tool you're thinking about introducing in your classroom, by the type of routine that you would like to introduce. So, for example, sharing information using online tools, that would be a routine, or by the digital skill that you're hoping to build. So many different ways. Again, this is a great app, and this is a free tool that I also would encourage people to check out for their classroom. It's called Glide. In Glide, basically what you do is you have a spreadsheet and you populate the spreadsheet, and it makes things look like this on the phone, on the user interface. It is a miraculous free tool, which I highly encourage you to check out. So explore our Glide and then go to Glide and consider maybe figuring out how you could integrate Glide into your classroom. All right, the next strategy is to use relevant context. So I just gave an example of using Google Forms as an exit ticket. Um, and then I said, oh, maybe you could use like Menti or something else. But Menti is not necessarily something students are going to encounter in their daily lives. So maybe not the best choice, because we really want to make sure that the technologies that you're bringing in to support instruction are also technologies that learners might encounter when they leave the classroom. So if you're thinking about the different areas where learners might be encountering tasks or doing problem solving, you might think about their child's education. If that's the case, you might think about these contexts, like maybe they have to use technology to enroll children in school, communicate with a teacher, read a school calendar, help with homework. What technologies might they need for those situations? Consider you could even poll, like you could do a survey to find out what your students are using and then bring those into the classroom. The same is true for employment. What are they using for filling out forms, doing job search and job applications, communicating at work, or doing presentations? Ask them and then bring those technologies into the classroom. Same is true for education and training, how they're enrolling in school, doing group work, doing research, completing class assignments, and in health, how are they filling out forms, finding and evaluating health information, communicating with doctors, or logging into provider website? It's all right in front of you if you just ask your learners. And then you have a great set of technologies that you could consider integrating into the work that you're doing in the classroom. Okay, so the second half of this discussion then, so we've talked a little bit about like how and why you might use technologies, how you might choose them. How are we then going to support this digital skills instruction as you're using those technologies? Um, Again, here's the Wakelet link in case people haven't had a chance. I think this might be the last chance. So check it out. Okay. So for me, in my opinion, and actually this is not just my opinion, I think it's pretty clear that it's instruction starting with competency frameworks, like well-defined competencies tends to be fairly like better organized instruction than just kind of a hit or miss approach. So when we talk about integrating digital skill instruction into content instruction, it still needs to be done with an awareness of a over maybe like a big picture of the competencies that are drawn on that learners need to be proficient in order to use technologies. The framework that we have landed on as most useful for adult learners is now called the Bridges Digital Skills Framework. It's adapted from some really excellent work done in the city of Seattle by somebody who works for the city office named David Keys. I think it's like the Seattle Office of Digital Equity and Inclusion. And then also Stacy Wedlake at University of Washington. They did this really interesting study on immigrant engagement with technologies in Seattle, and they based this wasn't necessarily laid out as a framework, a digital skills framework, but we picked up their work, which was Creative Commons licensed, and turned it into a fully developed digital skills framework. So what I love about this framework is that it is not just a list of discrete skills, but it talks about the different um, reasons people use technology. So the highest level categories are like create, communicate, you know, so, collaborate. And so it's kind of if you're thinking big picture about the activities in a classroom and classroom instruction, according to those categories, you can then search to see what competencies learners might be drawing on as they're engaging in that work in the classroom. So this is what each area looks like. So this is the domain of communication, and so we see it's exchanging information with others on digital platforms. This all comes from the research that Stacy and David did in Seattle. And then we have added some guiding questions that make this domain to help teachers understand if this domain is relevant to their learners. So do I understand the needs of my target audience? Am I able to adapt a message? Can I use a variety of technologies to interact and share information? Then within each of these, there are these sub communication skills. So communicate effectively, there's a definition, collaborate, make voice and video calls. For each of these competencies, which we have numbered, we have I can statements to really bring this alive and make it show the relevance across the different areas where learners might draw on these skills. So for example, in my life, I can adjust my social media feed content preferences so I will see more of what interests me. This is for this social media one right here. So you can see we're thinking more broadly than just the classroom as we're putting together these materials so that teachers can sort of simultaneously think about bringing technologies in that are relevant for the classroom, but then also see their application elsewhere. The other interesting thing that is in our framework is acknowledgement that language is important in teaching and understanding digital skill use. Um, your students can't hear instructions about how to do something if they are not getting the key vocabulary. So we offer some really key vocabulary for each of these domains. And then we also offer lists of the different communication tools that are probably needed within that. So it could give you a list of language that you might need to pre-teach as you're moving into supporting that domain development, but then also some of the relevant technologies that you could consider bringing into your instruction. The other thing that's in this Bridges framework is an opportunity for a self assessment. So we have just these checklists of the domains and the competencies. But then we also have more fully developed, and this predates the transition to calling it bridges. Um, we have actual whole workbook. It's a Google Sheets workbook that recontextualizes these competencies for employment, for senior citizens, for being a parent, for learning, for beginning computer users, just sort of life in general, and then also on mobile devices. These spreadsheets are really wonderful because they could just be shared with students, and students could track their own competency development, or teachers could use it as like an aggregate to keep track of the digital skills that they would want their students to work on in the classroom. So we're thinking about these as a first step, right? Like have an awareness of the skills that learners might need, and then bring those skills into the classroom as you're using technologies. If you are using, I don't know if New Jersey is a North Star state. Do many of you use North Star Digital? Okay, so we have a crosswalk. What's interesting is that the North Star Digital Literacy Assessment was actually one of the standards list, was one of the many that informed the Seattle Digital Inequity Inclusion work. So it's evident there, but in case people are worried, if you want to tap into these instructional resources, yeah, you teach North Star. We did a direct crosswalk with the North Star standards and the Bridges framework. So all of that information is in there for you. Okay, yeah, so here's an example. This is the North Star standard, and this is the way we talk about it in Bridges. And I will just say I was one of for the first 5 years of North Star, I was one of the people that helped write the standards and the assessments. So I can, yes, say this is an accurate crosswalk. It really is, it really does align nicely. Okay, so the last bit on framework is we also, to make this really easy, because we really do believe in the power of instructional routines, we actually do link to um, routines that support some of these tools, these skills. So that's sort of the last element of the toolkit, or of the bridges framework. Okay, and then we these all of the skills that are in the Bridges framework are also linked to a repository of open and free resources called the Digital Skills Library, also created as part of the Digital Resilience in the American Workforce Project. We conducted service learning experiences where we brought teachers together, and had them align content in some very well-known free resources like gcflearnfree.org to the competencies in the Bridges framework. And then we created this really cool database where you can search by, like, I'm looking for videos, I'm looking for e-modules, I'm looking for podcasts. You can find lots of multimedia resources in here to support your digital skills instruction. So I would definitely check that out too. It's in the Wakelet. And then the last strategy, I think this is the last strategy I want to talk about, is making connections back to people. You can't just turn you can't just like turn learners over to the digital skills library and expect them to be able to master these digital skills. It's really important to provide opportunities for collaboration, human connection, mentoring and support when learners are learning these new skills. Somebody said earlier, just oh, Elisa did, keep your eye on your learners when you see them struggling. A lot of the learners that I've worked with in my prior research kind of felt like if something wasn't going their way with the machine, that it was their problem. And that could be a big wall that they don't want to ever try to get past, or it could be an opportunity for some promising productive struggle with the right in-person support. The computer lab idea where people go off and learn digital skills is maybe a really efficient way to get a lot of people to learn digital skills, but it might not be the most effective way if there isn't enough support from a human being there to help the learners along. Um, the last strategy I want to just share here is um, my colleague Rachel Riggs at World Education created this tool actually when she was still at Frederick Community College in Maryland called the Digital Literacy Action Plan. So this is a second way of prioritizing which digital skills you focus on in the classroom. And it's one where you talk to learners about their goals. And then based on that conversation, you would use like a list of from a competency framework and pinpoint some of those goals for the learners and have them involved in tracking their progress on the goals. So this is putting create basically boosting learner agency and learning, legitimizing their efforts and their presence as users of technology, and it just creates a more affirming opportunity for them to move forward with their digital skill development. Okay, I have one last little section here, and it's probably my favorite thing to talk about. It's really important to make connections between language learning and digital skill development. I talked a little bit about this before, but I want to say more and introduce one more resource to you. Um, and actually, I will say before I move on to this, I first started thinking about this idea in my dissertation research where I was working with AmeriCorps members who were volunteering in community-based organizations, running computer labs where people would come in, sit down, work independently to build their digital skills. And we noticed that there was no communication about what was going on. The learners couldn't ask questions. They had a really hard time following instructions. And so with the community, this is sort of action research with the AmeriCorps members, we gradually came to the conclusion that we needed to do some pre-teaching of language to support this digital skill instruction. So long story short, about 8 years later, we get to the digital skills glossary. This also funded by USAID, by Octave. It's a open and free resource. It's basically a Google slide deck or series of Google slide decks that offer over 350 terms. Um, and activity ideas that you can use to build learners' understanding and use of the language that's involved in using technology. So we have an instructor guide to tell instructors how to use this. We have a whole glossary or an index that highlights like in at a glance what's in the slide decks. And then we have the two versions of the slide decks, one that's alphabetical A to Z, but then one that's thematic, and these thematic organizations align to the Bridges framework. So it would be very easy to start the Bridges framework, choose your competency area, then go over here, click to the thematic slides and choose the vocabulary and get access to this great instruction here that you could use with learners. So those of you who teach vocabulary might recognize this as something that looks like a Freyer model for a very useful tool for vocabulary instruction. This is essentially a multimedia Freyer model. We have the image that represents the term. Notice we are meticulous about attribution and playing by the rules with Creative Commons. If you click on this, you go to the Google pronunciation page, basically, I don't know if you knew this, but if you go to if you open up Google and you type pronounce.google.com and type a word, or if you like just a word and pronounce, you'll find this great opportunity to not only hear the word pronounced, but with many of them to actually practice the pronunciation and get feedback. So we've got that, we've got the definition, and we've got the use in a sentence. This is a free and open resource. What that means is you can take this, put a copy of it in your own Google Drive, download it as a PowerPoint, and you can customize it in any way you like and use it with your learners. We are just talking with some people that we found out in California who have created a Spanish version of this. And because we have Creative Commons license on this to share alike, we're going to be getting that and adding that. So the idea with almost all of the work that we do is that everything is better when we collaborate and share freely. And so this is a great example of that. This is kind of another, this is an example of some of the activities. So we knew we could, the Freyer model sort of slide deck is a really great contribution, I think, to classrooms, but we also recognize that some teachers would want to have some examples of activities. So we have like 50 activities in the instructional guide that's available here. You'll notice these are aligned. The activities are aligned with the skill areas in the Bridges framework. Full attribution to the teacher. This is a wonderful teacher in Texas, and then a description of the activity. So the activities that we included are geared toward building visual recognition of the word, building language, recognizing common features of the word, understanding how the word could be used across context, and then just pushing the learners to experiment with these new tools. Um, so I guess one last word about language. Yes, teach the English language words if you've got English language learners. If you're, but if you're working in multilingual classrooms, consider drawing on home language and home literacies beyond English to support comprehension and skill development in digital literacy. So if that means like this program in Texas or in California is doing, they're creating a Spanish version of this, and they're using it as a bridge to digital skill instruction so the learners can then better progress across all of their learning. Great, do it, because multilingual language, there is room for home language use in English language instruction. And yeah, for a while, I mean, I think I remember when I did my MA work in the mid 90s, there was like anathema to draw on home language use. But these, thankfully we've grown in our understanding about what's needed, and with the translanguaging movement, multiliteracies understanding, we've moved beyond that. So just hold on to that too. And then I couldn't end a presentation without just a word about AI, generative AI. I did provide some cautionary tales at the beginning of this slideshow, but I do want to say that AI literacy is the newest wrinkle in digital literacies. And we do need to move towards supporting our learners' development of their AI literacy, and we're thinking about that in two ways at World Education. One is to help teachers understand what generative AI is and how it can be used to support instruction, but then also to help teachers understand how to teach learners about what AI is and how to use it. So I'm not gonna go deeply into this. I just wanted to share this last example. Last summer we convened about 50 teachers in some service learning where they were learning about generative AI as, and then through that learning, we're able to collaborate and build a bunch of activities that they could use in their classrooms. So this is called the Open Prompt Book. As you know, in the things like Gemini and GPT, we use prompts to get the information that we want out of it. So what we did is we did some research, we found a framework for generating prompts that are going to create reliable content. And then as teachers were practicing with that, we accumulated this treasure trove of activities that could be brought into the classroom. So this book describes the activities, but then also when available, actually links to the prompt that's either in Gemini or ChatGPT, so that you can actually see it in action. So we'll be covering this a little bit more tomorrow. Tomorrow, the plan is to create opportunities for people to experiment in some of these resources that we've talked about and walk through a planning sequence that would leverage these resources to come up with ideas for supporting learners.